The manufacturing of a mass psychosis. Can sanity return? Awaken from the illusion. Have you ever wondered how entire societies fall into delusion, and more importantly, how we begin to wake up? In this video, we explore the silent forces that shape our collective psyche, and reveal the quiet revolution that begins within. This is not about politics. This is about reclaiming the self in a world that wants you numb. Stay with us as we dive into the patterns of mass psychosis, the psychology of control, and the sacred return to personal truth. Each insight you'll hear is a key, and every moment you stay is a step toward your own awakening. Let's begin. PHNI. When the world goes insane, the silent spread of collective mind infection. The masses have rarely sought truth. When it knocks, it often goes unnoticed, overshadowed by the warm allure of illusion. As French social psychologist Gustave Le Bon once observed, people prefer comforting falsehoods over uncomfortable realities. Whoever feeds them fantasy becomes their hero, whoever dares to question it, their enemy. While diseases of the body are visible, diagnosable, and feared, the diseases of the mind often go unrecognized until they have infected an entire society. These mental epidemics do not announce themselves with rashes or fevers. Instead, they shift how we think, feel, and connect, with ourselves, and with each other. Among them, mass psychosis is the most insidious. It is not madness of the few, but of the many. When delusion becomes communal, it no longer feels like madness. It feels like consensus. Through history, this collective descent into unreality has taken many forms. Religious hysteria, witch hunts, genocides, and even bizarre events like dancing manias. But in our modern world, the most dangerous version of this phenomenon is psychological submission to totalitarianism, not always imposed by force, but more often welcomed in exchange for safety, certainty, or belonging. Mass psychosis does not begin with chaos. It begins with the erosion of inner clarity. It begins when individuals, overwhelmed by fear or disconnection, surrender their ability to question. When uncertainty lingers long enough, people stop seeking truth and start clinging to narratives that promise simplicity, even if they're untrue. And here lies the tragedy: beneath this surrender often lies deep emotional fatigue, trauma, loneliness, confusion. What looks like blind obedience is often a survival mechanism. But in surrendering our inner compass to the collective delusion, we drift farther from our own essence. To see clearly in an insane world is not a sign of madness, it is the beginning of healing. This clarity does not come from resisting the crowd in anger, but from returning to ourselves in silence. If we wish to restore sanity, we must begin not with revolution, but with remembrance of our values, our presence, and our inner truth. Part 2. Corrupted power, when society becomes a prison of consciousness. A society descending into mass psychosis does not merely suffer a loss of reason, it undergoes a profound psychological transformation. This shift, subtle at first, begins with a restructuring of relationships between the rulers and the ruled. Power stops being a tool of service and becomes a mechanism of control. Those who wield it rise beyond human accountability, while the people beneath them grow numb, passive, and emotionally regressed. In totalitarian systems, the ruling class often assumes an aura of infallibility. They are not perceived as flawed human beings, but as the sole arbiters of truth and morality. Their pronouncements, however arbitrary or harmful, are accepted without question, not because they are wise, but because they offer certainty in a world that feels uncertain. This transformation is not accidental. It is cultivated, step by step. The ruled are conditioned to obey through repetition, fear, and dependency. As Joost Meerloo once observed, the minds of the masses begin to resemble those of individuals suffering from schizophrenia, caught in loops of confusion, emotional instability, and mental fragmentation. In time, People stop trusting their own perceptions, relying instead on the official narrative to make sense of reality. Such dependency is not just intellectual, it is emotional. People find comfort in being led, even if the direction is harmful. It relieves them of responsibility, and in a strange way, offers a psychological retreat into a childlike state. Obedience becomes a form of escape, and silence a survival strategy. But this regression comes at a cost. The deeper people sink into this collective trance, the further they move from their own agency. They no longer act from conviction, but from conditioning. Their inner world shrinks, their ability to discern erodes, and the strength of character needed to face truth is replaced by the desire to conform. Yet buried within this descent is an invitation. When we witness the machinery of manipulation, we are not only called to resist it, we are called to recognize our own vulnerability to it. It is in acknowledging this vulnerability that true strength is born. By reclaiming responsibility for our inner life, we begin to rebuild the foundation of self-awareness and courage. No external system can imprison a free mind. And no ruler can dominate the spirit of one who chooses awareness over submission. Part 3, The Death of Reason, Menticide and the Collapse of Free Will. Mass psychosis does not occur by accident. It is manufactured. One psychological cut at a time. The architects of such mass delusion, whether they are political ideologues, corrupt elites, or technocratic planners, understand a fundamental truth. To control the outer world, one must first destabilize the inner world. This is where menticide begins, the systematic killing of the human mind. The process often starts with fear. When individuals are overwhelmed by anxiety, real or manufactured, they become more suggestible, more likely to abandon rationality in exchange for perceived safety. Those in power exploit this by releasing waves of fear, strategically spaced with moments of relief. These cycles wear down emotional resilience and increase dependency. Joost Meerloo called this tactic the rape of the mind. But fear alone is not enough to truly fracture the human psyche. Confusion must be introduced. Information becomes contradictory. Logic is replaced by slogans. The truth is drowned beneath a flood of noise. In such an environment, people lose trust not only in authorities but in their own judgment. They become disoriented, detached, and emotionally fragmented. The individual's inner compass begins to malfunction. This is where propaganda thrives. The mind, already strained, is now bombarded with distorted narratives. Lies are repeated so often they begin to sound like truth. Disorientation breeds dependency. Dependency breeds obedience. Eventually, people stop asking whether something is right, they only ask whether it is allowed. Menticide is not merely the spread of lies. It is the erosion of thought itself. It trains people to distrust their instincts and abandon their moral agency. And it is alarmingly effective. A once independent soul becomes a compliant subject, unable to resist even the most blatant absurdities. Yet this is not the end. In every human being lies a deep, often dormant power, the ability to witness. To see the storm without becoming the storm. To feel the fear. And still choose clarity. This witnessing is not passive, it is the seed of healing. The moment we begin to observe our conditioning rather than obey it, we reawaken the power of free will. Menticide may be the death of reason, but reason is not easily buried. In silence, in reflection, in courage, it returns. And with it comes the first breath of inner freedom. Part 4. Alone in the crowd, psychological isolation and emotional numbness. One of the most powerful tools in the making of mass psychosis is not brute force, it is isolation. Human beings are inherently social. Not only in their behaviors but in their psychological development. We learn who we are through reflection in others. We stay grounded through connection. When these bonds are broken, The mind begins to drift. In times of psychological warfare, the first target is not the body, it is trust. Isolation breeds fear. And fear intensifies dependence. When people are separated from family, friends, and community, they lose access to the emotional mirrors that once helped them regulate their inner world. In their place comes a void, quickly filled by the dominant narrative. It becomes not only the loudest voice, but the only one. This separation creates the perfect environment for psychological conditioning. Alone, people are easier to manipulate. Their internal resistance softens. Like Pavlov's dogs, they are conditioned through repeated emotional cues, fear, relief, confusion, until they begin to respond automatically. What was once questioned is now accepted. What was once painful becomes normal. But the cost is profound. Isolation doesn't just weaken resistance, it wounds the spirit. It creates a quiet, aching hunger, for connection, for meaning, for affirmation. And it is in this hunger that many surrender their agency. They trade their inner truth for belonging, their voice for acceptance, their discernment for the illusion of harmony. This numbness is not apathy, it is exhaustion. When one's nervous system is constantly bombarded with conflicting emotions and cut off from authentic relationships, the mind shuts down as a protective response. Silence becomes safer than expression. Withdrawal feels wiser than confrontation. And in that quiet retreat, many lose themselves entirely. Yet within this darkness lies a hidden door. Solitude is not always isolation. If chosen consciously, solitude becomes a place of repair. In stillness, we begin to feel again. We notice the tension in our chest, the dullness in our thoughts, the longing in our hearts. And from this awareness, healing begins. To reconnect with others, we must first reconnect with ourselves. To find our voice again, we must learn to listen inwardly. Even when the crowd surrounds us, our path forward begins alone, but never in despair. For solitude, when embraced with presence, leads not to disconnection, but to awakening. Part 5, The Pact with Darkness, Trading Freedom for the Illusion of Safety. When the storm of fear, confusion, and isolation reaches its peak, a turning point arrives. The masses, weary and disoriented, no longer seek truth. They seek relief. And at this moment, the ruling class extends its hand, not as a savior, but as a manipulator. A bargain is silently offered: surrender your freedom, and we will give you the illusion of order. This trade is rarely explicit. It is felt, not spoken. It lives in the quiet nod of compliance, in the avoided questions, in the voice that no longer dares to speak. It is not a conscious decision, but a gradual erosion of will. Over time, people no longer feel that they are choosing submission, they believe there is no other choice. But this pact comes at a devastating cost. To feel safe, they must stop thinking. To feel protected, they must stop questioning. And so begins the death of responsibility. Individuals relinquish not only their rights, but their inner authority. The power to choose is outsourced. The voice of conscience is muted. What follows is a deep psychological shift. In the womb of totalitarianism, there is silence. There is structure. There are clear lines, rules, and routines. It is a return to the safety of childhood, where someone else makes the decisions, where uncertainty is removed. But this is not peace. It is obedience. And it demands everything. The totalitarian promise is seductive because it mirrors a deep emotional longing, to be cared for, to be safe, to be free from the weight of uncertainty. But this longing, when not met with awareness, becomes a trap. For in trading freedom for comfort, people also trade meaning. They lose the raw, honest engagement with life that brings growth, beauty, and depth. The danger is not only in the rulers, but in the ruled. When enough people prefer comfort over courage, control over chaos. They will build their own cages, and thank their captors for locking the doors. Yet all is not lost. The first step back is the most vital one, to recognize the bargain. To ask, what have I sacrificed for the illusion of peace? In that question lies the seed of awakening. For freedom is not merely the absence of chains, it is the presence of choice. And meaning is not found in comfort, but in courageous living. Part 6. Rising from chaos, the healing seed within. When a society begins to awaken from mass psychosis, the path to healing is neither immediate nor simple. It is not a dramatic revolution, but a quiet return, an inward turning. The question is no longer how to fix the world, but how to reclaim the self. For only by restoring clarity within can we hope to bring clarity without. Healing begins when we stop outsourcing our sanity. It begins when we question the narratives we've absorbed and confront the fear we've internalized. This is not about defiance for its own sake. It is about remembering who we were before fear reshaped us. It's about reconnecting with the stillness beneath the noise. The human psyche, though fragile, is not easily broken. It bends under pressure, but it also knows how to mend, given space, time, and care. In the quiet moments, away from screens, away from headlines, something ancient reawakens. A sense of presence. A flicker of knowing. A silent strength that says, you are still here. This return to self is not selfish. On the contrary, it is essential. For a society built on confused, frightened individuals cannot heal. But a community of grounded, self-aware people becomes immune to manipulation. The more we strengthen our inner clarity, the less susceptible we become to mass delusion. Our calm becomes contagious. Our courage creates space for others to breathe. Practical healing does not require perfection. It begins with small acts, journaling to untangle thought from noise, meditating to observe the mind without judgment. Walking slowly to feel the body rejoin the earth. Each step toward awareness, however humble, is a step away from control and toward freedom. And as healing spreads, the old machinery begins to fail. The propaganda loses its grip. The fear loses its sting. The power structures that fed on confusion begin to crumble, not by force, but by starvation. They cannot survive in a world of awake, self-possessed individuals. This is the real revolution. Not loud. Not televised. But deep. And quiet. And utterly unstoppable. It does not begin in the streets, it begins in the soul. And when enough souls remember, the world changes, not through violence, but through vision. Part 7. Awakening is an act, when you become the guiding flame. Awakening is not a passive experience. It is not a gentle drifting toward clarity, nor a moment gifted by chance. It is an act, deliberate. Sometimes painful, always courageous. In a world where conformity is rewarded and silence is safe, awakening means choosing to see, choosing to feel, and choosing to live with presence. This choice does not guarantee comfort. Often, it brings discomfort. To awaken is to pierce the veil of illusion. It is to face the dissonance between what we are told and what we intuitively know. It is to feel grief for the years we spent asleep, anger for the truths we ignored, and sorrow for the parts of ourselves we abandoned. But it also brings power. For to see clearly is to reclaim agency. When we no longer outsource truth, we remember how to think. When we stop suppressing pain, we remember how to feel. And when we stop chasing validation, we remember how to be. The awakened individual does not seek to control the world, they seek to master themselves. They begin to cultivate discipline, compassion, and presence. Not as a performance, but as a practice. They understand that their most radical contribution is not to shout louder, but to live more honestly. Their clarity becomes a mirror for others. Their peace becomes a refuge. Their courage becomes an invitation. This is how transformation spreads. Not through force, but through resonance. One centered person can anchor an entire room. One authentic life can ignite countless others. Awakening is contagious, not because it convinces, but because it reminds. And yet, this path is not easy. It requires solitude. It demands integrity. It often means standing alone. But it is never in vain. For every act of inner truth plants a seed. And every seed that takes root becomes a flame. You may not change the world with a single act. But you will light a path. And someone walking in the dark may find their way because of your light. This is not ideology. This is living. And it beggy. Ns not with grand declarations, but with quiet choices, made in stillness, kept in truth. Part 8, A New Civilization, Living Freely Even in Chains. When systems collapse and illusions dissolve. Something ancient re-emerges, the human spirit's ability to imagine a different world. In the ruins of broken ideologies, a quiet revolution begins, not with protests or proclamations, but with how we choose to live. This is where a new civilization is born, not from institutions, but from individuals who refuse to betray their inner truth. We do not need to wait for governments to change or leaders to awaken. We begin by building parallel structures, as Václav Havel once described, communities, practices, and ways of living that exist within the old world, yet stand morally apart from it. These are not countercultures built on rejection, but subcultures rooted in integrity. They are not escapes, but alternatives. A parallel structure can be anything: a school that teaches how to think, not what to think, a business that values service over profit, an art form that reveals truth rather than decorates lies. It can be a shared garden, a gathering circle, or simply the way two people choose to speak with honesty and care. What matters is not the form, but the spirit behind it. These quiet acts of defiance are powerful because they do not ask for permission. They grow from the inside out. They reject the premise that we must wait for change to live well. Instead, they embody the change itself. They declare, we will not abandon our dignity. We will not abandon our humanity. We will live well, here, now, together. And when enough people begin to live in this way, something remarkable happens. A second culture arises, a parallel society that breathes where the old one suffocates. This second culture is not utopia. It is not perfect. But it is alive. It is a me for those who remember what freedom feels like. It is a refuge for those who choose meaning over obedience. This is the real work of transformation. Not the overthrow of one system for another, but the creation of a culture that cannot be corrupted because it is not built on control. It is built on conscience. It grows through connection. It survives by truth. Even within chains, a free human being can build. Even in silence, a true voice can rise. Even in darkness, a flame can be passed from hand to hand. This is how civilizations are reborn, not through conquest, but through character. Not through dominance, but through devotion. We are not merely resisting a broken world, we are remembering how to live. And in remembering, we become the seed of a new world. Not in some distant future, but here. Now. In every breath, every choice, every moment we dare to live in truth. We are the beginning of something new. None of us are truly alone. Every honest voice, every small act in the direction of truth, touches someone, awakens something. Sends out a light we cannot fully measure. The world we live in may be chaotic, may feel lost, but it is also fertile ground for planting seeds of freedom, awareness, and compassion. If we wait for the perfect moment to live truthfully, to live fully, it may never come. But if we begin here and now, in the ordinary moments of life, with integrity in our words, with kindness in how we see others, with steadiness in keeping our minds clear, then the miracle has already begun. Perhaps the point is not to change the whole world in one day, but simply this: not to let the world take away who we truly are. Awakening is not a destination, it is a way of living. And when we live as though we are awake, then our lives, quiet but profound, become the clearest proof that a new civilization has already begun. From within each of us. And from there, it spreads.